can go then. Yes, sir. So, I spoke to my daughter and son earlier, right? Yeah, they tried to fake me out, about you, and as far as the surprise, that you and these other people would be coming up here. But I had to sign all the releases, yesterday, so therefore I seen everything on there. And once I seen the interview or whatever the case is, I was say yes. This is all right.
So, William says that he came to court.
Right.
Did he ever tell you the story?
No, he's told me through other people, but never directly.
He said he came to court that day, he wouldn't let it in.
Right.
He had an exact story.
Right.
And they said he had a weapon.
Right.
And so he bragged about it.
Well, you know how it was then. Things fired up. You know how it was. Yeah. And I'm glad. It's about time. But nevertheless, it's a crisis situation though. But I hopefully, we can rise to the occasion. Hopefully.
You didn't go
this is the control unit that I'm in, right? So everything that go along with it, I'm cut off completely. In fact, this little get up I'm in now, this is like, I usually got the monkey suit on. I look like one of them clowns coming out of Dachau or Treblinka someplace, with the stripes and all that. I haven't seen anything like this since I come in here. I've been here over a year and a half. I get nothing. Period. I'm in the control unit. This is Pennsylvania's Maryland. This is like the new joint in Colorado. So actually it's two joints for real. It's one joint that's a regular penitentiary that's out there, but everything behind these walls, the building that Mumia is in, which is the death row building, and the building I'm in, they're all identical, but they're cut off, cut and dry. I'm in the control unit, cut and dry. And I'm being told that I will never leave here, which is crap I don't pay no attention to, because, I've been told worse. I ain't worried about it. But right now, no. Yes. Actually, this is the premier control unit for the whole state.
What's the population?
They have 386 beds. Although they're double capacity, they're not doubled at the present time.
No. I got interference.
You got interference? Is that me?
I'm getting interference.
Yeah.
Testing.
Should I move it? Should I move this?
No. Just keep going. I'll figure it out.
Testing. You getting interference?
Test.
Testing, 1, 2. Is that okay? Should I hold it?
Yeah, just hold it.
Testing, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Don't move it around, just leave it down.
Just leave it down?
Yeah.
So what's your days look like? How much time you have out yourself?
An hour a day.
23 hours.
23 hours, 3 showers a week, 5 hours of outdoor recreation, and that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
You have access to the law library?
We have access to the law library, but as you know, it's not.
They bring it to you. You got to put down.
No, we can go to the law library. It's right on the unit itself. The unit is completely self-contained. Everything that's done is done on the unit. The meals are brought in. They're prepared and they're brought in. Everything else is done right on the unit.
Your meals are served in the cell?
They're served right in the cell.
So you don't come out even eat?
I don't come out for anything except 1 hour, 5 days a week to exercise.
And what's that? That's a dog cage or something?
That's a dog cage, single capacity dog cage, 12-foot fences, concertina wire, walls around the entire unit itself.
So the recreation is out of sight of each other too, right? You can just see each other through the cage.
You can see 7 men, 6 other men, including yourself, that's within the cages. However, the unit, although it has 96 individual cells, you can only see 24 men because it's broke up into 4 24 units. So you never see anybody but 24 people. And then they have 4 buildings like that. Each one of them are similarly broke up into 4 different units. Altogether it's 386, these maxi cells. But out of 386 men, you will probably never see but 24 men that's in on your unit, in addition to the officers as well as maybe 2 workers, that may come from another unit. That's about it. I've been here a little over a year and a half, and within that time, I've seen Brother Mumia twice. And I've been able to holler at him and say, "How you doing?" once within that time. And at one time, we were in the same identical building for 6 months.
Yeah, he was telling me.
And that was...
You could be in the same building, won't even know somebody's there.
Yeah. So that's the whole idea about, how they're making these new control units. It's to completely cut you off as much as possible from all of the, outside stimuli that they can. Also within this unit, we're not allowed to have access to our own reading material. We're not allowed, we have to read the...
You're not permitted books?
No, we're permitted access to books within their library. They provide a library, which is everything from the boy who invented popcorn or bubblegum, or up to some other crap, some system crap that they want you to read.
Oh, wait. You can't order books from the publisher or...
No, you're not. You can order what you want, but when it comes, it goes into your property to be given to you when you're released. And in the case of a person like me, I've been told over and over again in writing that I will never, N-E-V-E-R, be released from this unit. And of course, as you know...
So you're saying all the books that you're sent are put in your property and you never get to read them?
No, you're never allowed the books except from approval from their board, which is the Program Review Committee.
Okay, so like say for instance your book was sent to you from the publisher. It goes to the Program Review Committee.
It goes to the Program Review Committee.
Let's assume that they okay it.
Right.
Then you can read it.
Then you can read it.
Okay, so you can have it in your cell.
You would have it in your cell in exchange for another book.
So you're permitted how many books in your cell? 5?
No, what you're permitted the necessary legal books for cases that you're preparing, as well as any one religious book. Outside of that, your leisure reading material, something that's sent from somebody on any given topic, you're only allowed it if the Program Review Committee approves it. So as it stands right now, and I've been here a year and a half, and I've been given access to being able to exchange 2 books on a 1-for-1 basis. And this is because I haven't had any type of rule infraction since 1989. So you can imagine what I would have to do, to work myself into, some more access to, some more sensory input.
I think the problem is coming from the...
handcuffs?
The rattling of that. If it doesn't rattle too much, I think we get better reception.
I'll try, but
Can you sit down?
Well, they didn't give him a chair.
It's a chair.
Yeah, I could sit, but I'm more comfortable standing unless you would prefer me to sit.
It's more relaxing when you sit, don't you think?
I'm more relaxed standing. I've been running so long, man. This is my thing. But if you prefer me, I'll sit.
Yeah, I
The
think.
cameras are all fixed to him standing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, cool. Because that's who I am, man. I got to move, If I don't move, I'll die. I'll be destroyed.
You're like a shark now, huh?
It's been that way, ain't it?
So therefore, your ability to read different diverse material is restricted at best.
Yes, it has to come through the PRC. I'll give you an example. About 6 months ago, my daughter had me send a dissertation that was by a Kim Holder, which is a graduate student. He got a PhD on this dissertation, and it was on the history of the Black Panther Party.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
And the program review committee reviewed it and refused to let me have access to it. No reason, because they don't have to give a reason, because all of this is discretionary.
Who's on the review committee?
The program review committee, it's 3 people. It's usually the deputy warden for operations, that's the security man, as well as the deputy warden for treatment, that's the program man, as well as some other
Deputy warden for treatment?
Deputy warden for treatment. That's the party that's involved.
Is he a doctor or something?
I don't know whether any of them would have any type of doctorate, type of degree.
Treatment implies some type of therapy or something like that.
It would imply that, but from my years in this system here,
It doesn't mean that.
it doesn't mean anything, because there's no type of treatment worthwhile no way.
And who else?
And another classification, which would be the guy who's head of the councils for all practical purposes.
Like a senior counselor or something.
More or less.
And they make a determination on what you should read and shouldn't read.
They make a determination on everything that you do.
Is there a criteria they're supposed to utilize?
There is a criteria, but the criteria is so broad that it gives them wide latitude to determine everything within your life except a limited number of things. And amongst those limited number of things, of course, they have to provide for your safety. They can't kill you. They can't allow anybody else to outright kill you, except in a limited number of reasons, such as in the case of the state, or to prevent you from, bringing deadly harm on somebody else. They can't kill you. They have to provide you regular meals 3 times a day. They have to provide you 3 showers a week, 3 shades, 5 hours exercise. That's it. That's the only things that's the rule. Everything else beyond those particular categories, they have completely control over. It's discretionary. So as a consequence, they say that within their treatment, that they will give you things based on, your adjustment, your behavior, whatever the case is. But there's no criteria for what they use to determine. And from what I understand, the courts have backed them on that for quite a few years, where they supposedly, once reaching those particular positions, that they supposedly have enough understanding where the courts would leave it up to their discretion to determine what type of treatment programs beyond the 3 hots and the cots that they would give you.
Let me ask you something, Russell. You've been in prison how long now?
24 plus years.
24 plus years.
That's correct.
And since the time you've been in prison, have you noted a decided shift in, first of all, the inmate population and their consciousness, and the way that the Department of Correction goes about administering the prison system, and if that shift has significantly changed your condition?
Well, the primary shift that I've noticed since I've been in the prison is the overwhelming numbers of prisoners who've come in the system. Presently, just within the state system, not counting the local systems, presently within the state system, they got over 30,000 prisoners. When I first came here, there was less than 4,000 prisoners in this system.
In Pennsylvania? In
Pennsylvania, it was less. I got that wrong. It was less than 5,000 prisoners within the Pennsylvania system. Now it's over 30,000 prisoners. That's the major change. The makeup of the prisoners has always essentially been the same in this state, which is roughly 60 or more % black, possibly 5 or more % Hispanic, and then the rest, were white. So that makeup is basically the same. However, this large influx of prisoners have radically changed how the prison system has been handled. When I first come to prison within this system here, the prison system was lock us up, but basically the treatment was relatively, although they hold us captive, you could at least get the things that you need. Nowadays, or at least within the last 8 or 9 years, because that's when the large influx begin to come in. Now you can't even get clothing you need. About all you can get nowadays is enough to eat.
Well, let me say this. That's the general conditions of prisoners. But now, your situation has been unique. You and other political prisoners have been treated differently. How long have you been in isolation, in this form of isolation?
I've been in isolation within these 24 years, over 16 or 17 years. Not straight.
Off and on.
But off and on, I've been in isolation.
And what has the pretext been for putting you in isolation?
Is that I'm just too much of a danger to the overall system.
Well, I mean, that's vague. Aren't all prisoners a danger to the system?
Well, in my case in particular, I've escaped more than once, and I've attempted to escape more than once.
Oh, I see.
So they always use the escape mainly.
You have one of them Kunta Kinte complexes.
I absolutely have a Kunta Kinte. My name is Maroon. I'm not about staying in an oppressive situation.
You ain't about staying.
Hell no. Anybody who sits up in prison and don't try to go.
I know we was trying to sit you down just now since you said you more comfortable staying.
That's out the question. They must don't know what them guns and guards and fences and wire and all that crap is for. Well, which I might add to that, which is nothing really extraordinary. Because if my situation was so extraordinary, not saying that, I'm not in a category, that's outside of the normal category, because they don't have that many people within this whole system who escape successfully, on more than one occasion. However, the prison systems were built specifically to keep people here by force.
Yeah.
So that is actually a part of the overall dynamic.
That's what I was going to ask you. When you were housed in the other facilities in the state prior to the construction of this one, you were told that one of the reasons that you were treated the way you were treated was because there was no facility designed security-wise to afford you full programs. Once they had a facility, you would be afforded the full program.
That's correct.
And I imagine this was the facility they had in mind.
This was the facility that they built for guys like me, because I'm amongst that small percentage, and most of that percentage who, whether they are escape risks or there are other risks that ordinarily that they feel as though that they cannot allow within the general populations within the other prisons, because they weren't secure enough. They built this prison specifically for that, according to their own words and their documents and whatnot. And I was sent here. In fact, I was told as far back as 1991, I was told at that time I was in isolation also. And I was in the courts and otherwise asking why, with my behavior adjustment, which was no infractions period, because other than wanting to go home, I'm a violent prisoner, because I don't see any reason to be involved in any type of infraction with anybody except for my own safety or whatever, something of that nature. So in light of the fact that I was a model prisoner, I wanted to know, the courts wanted to know, my relatives wanted to know, people was concerned about me, wanted to know how come I could not be released from the isolation. And I was told each time that each institution, that there was no institution in the whole state system that they felt within their judgment that would be safe for me. But they was building a new institution, State Correctional Institution in Greenville. And once this place was built, shortly afterwards, I came here in January '95 with the understanding from the other institutions that I would be released, assuming that I maintained my good, behavior record.
Have you applied to be released to General, did you make?
I've applied to be released to general population each of my 30-day reviews.
They have a routine 30-day review.
They review me every 30 days. And each 30-day review that I attend, and I attend most of them, I ask the same thing for the record. Allow me to be released. However, on my first review that I came here, I asked to be released. And I was told in no uncertain terms that I would never be released here. At which time I brought up
Who told you that?
I was told that by the deputy warden, Varner.
He's the deputy warden of operations or something?
He's the deputy warden of operations, is mainly the top security man outside of the superintendent or the warden.
Is that unusual? That an inmate, that a prisoner is told that they would never be released, despite the fact that the system, the Department of Corrections has a policy requiring objective review of the inmate status, but he's told from the onset that this is basically a formality and that he's never going to be released. Is that unusual? Are there other inmates that are told that?
Well, it's not unusual to me because I've heard a little bit of everything since I've been in prison. But for purposes of the law, it's highly unusual because even that is outside of the wide parameters that they're given by all the laws and all the regulations that I'm familiar with. That there's no such thing as a forever thing with any type of, in any status within the correctional system.
Well, people have the impression that in the United States that the prison system is run based on some type of legal criteria, that the employees of the prison system are constrained by rules, that there's regulations that inmates must follow, and that if inmates follow the necessary rules, they're afforded certain privileges and certain concessions. If they don't, they're punished. And what you're saying, and what we hear you saying, is that in effect, except for the escape attempts that you have, which all prisons are designed to thwart, and that's the nature of prisons, to thwart escape attempts, that aside from that, you've been a model prisoner, but yet here you are in the maximum control unit within a maxi prison, handcuffed in a non-contact cage, based on your history in this system and not on your actual conduct. Is that what you're saying?
That's absolutely the case.
Do you think that's connected to your politics and to why you came to prison from the...
Well, not only is it connected to my politics, but it goes a little beyond that. In fact, I have been in the prisons with the top administrators of this prison when they weren't top administrators. In other words, I've seen them come up through the ranks because I've been here as long as most of them, and more than, as long as any of them, more than most of them. Let's just put it that way. And formerly, I've had contact with some of these top administrators, and in fact, I've had literally bodily, contact with some of these administrations. In fact, I escaped from one penitentiary, and one of the administrators, I was holding him hostage for a while. I didn't do any harm to him. I just didn't want him to get in the way of my attempt to leave the institution. Well, at that time, he was not an administrator. He was a low-ranking staff member. However, he's moved up through the ranks, and now he's an administrator. Well, I'm almost positive that this weighs quite a bit on determining whether or not he would ever allow me in the population. In fact, the party that I said told me I would never be released, Deputy Varner, he is the individual that in 1977, when I escaped from the institution, within the escape, him and a number of other guards were taken hostage and they was put in a room. None of them was harmed. But when I come up here, it seemed like to me, when I discovered that he was the deputy, I seen a conflict of interest there, but
that's what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you, so the people that are passing on your ongoing,
they got me hostage now, where I had them hostage for about 5 minutes.
So the people that are passing on your monthly on your status are people that you've had direct relationships with, and obviously there's a conflict of interest there.
Right.
What I wanted to ask you though was the status of your case now. You've been in jail over 2.5 decades. What is the status of your case now?
The status of my case is that I'm serving 2 life sentences, 19 and a half to 38 years, 5 to 10, 1 to 2, and 3.5 to 7. And all of these are running consecutive, which means that I have to finish each sentence before I would begin another one. In Pennsylvania, life is natural life. There's no years on life. The only way you can get rid of a life sentence within Pennsylvania, you have to be commuted. You have to get a commutation that's got to be signed directly from the government. Since I've been in this system, in this time, outside of some juvenile years where I was in juvenile institutions, the commutations that were given out does not amount, to my knowledge, to 100 prisoners. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of lifers over this 20-some years. So the commutation, as a general rule, is not really something that a life prisoner can look forward to. I don't know what the future holds, because as I say, when I first come to prison, it was only 5,000 prisoners, and it was a relative smaller percentage of lifers then. Now there's thousands and thousands of lifers because there's thousands of more prisoners. So I don't know whether or not that, these prisoners will be offered commutation. And as far as myself, I doubt very seriously whether I have any type of chance for any type of commutation from this governor, who happens to be one of those supposedly tough on crime political governors, or any other governor, for the simple reason that my case originally is in relationship to the killing of a Philadelphia policeman. And it's highly unlikely, in my way of thinking, that they would release anybody on commutation who has got anything to do with the killing of a law officer. So my 2 lives and my other years that I got, although I constantly fight, and I've been fighting them 20-some years, I doubt very seriously whether there's any possibility of me ever leaving this system through the court system.
Well, now, today, the issue of police brutality and the treatment of national minorities by the police are once again in the news, and it's becoming an issue. Like you said, you were convicted of a police murder. Do you think that your involvement in the Black Panther Party was the reason why you were convicted of this, as opposed to concrete evidence that you had anything to do with this?
Well, possibly. Probably. I have numerous FBI files that I received through the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act that says right on the face of them that my case was targeted specifically by the then head of the FBI, J. Dhoruba. My case, I was mentioned by name. I have at least close to 800 pages of these files, and I could probably get thousands of pages, but I was not ever allowed access to them without the money, and I don't have the money to buy them. But I could see crystal clear by the files that I got that I was absolutely targeted by the Department of Justice through its Federal Bureau of Investigation director to give specific hands-on direction as to what should be done with my case. So the reason I say possibly is because I don't know just what all was done in relationship to my case and what, my defense that I put forward. I don't know, because I don't have access to these documents. But what I do have is people who, in other words, I don't have any federal charges, period. I never did have any federal charges. However, the director of the FBI, he got involved, of course, in my case because I was being sought on unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, which is a federal case. But as soon as I was captured, that was dropped. So nominally, there was not supposed to be any type of federal input. Nevertheless, I got these files where it shows that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, through its director, was into my case all the way up to, I don't know how far it goes, but it goes beyond the point where I was arrested and I was being tried. So I don't know what's there. I don't know without that whether or not, something is underneath what I do.
Are you familiar with the Federal Bureau of Investigation's program called PRISAC, Prison Activist Program?
Absolutely.
Do you know that this was a national program in which they trained state and local law enforcement and correctional officials into how to deal with political activists such as yourself? Do you think that you were targeted under this PRISAC while you were in Pennsylvania custody?
I couldn't say specific whether I was or not, because I would have to have some documents to corroborate my ideas. But I do know this. I know that since the first day I've ever come in this system, outside of my attempting to liberate myself and to go home by escape and any other means. I have always been treated differently, especially to give you a perfect example. In 1989, I was sitting in the State Correctional Institution in Dallas, which is about 300 and some odd miles northeast of here. I was in lockup at that time also because I was sent there from another institution, allegedly because the other institution was doing some repairs. And once I got there, I was locked up because the institution allegedly could not contain my type of person. I was supposed to be too much of a escape risk. So I was pigeonholed into this institution until the other institution, which was a maximum security, could finish its repairs. That was in 1984. However, by 1989, after being in lockup at that institution for that reason, a rebellion, so-called riot, happened at the Camp Hill institution, which is another institution hundreds of miles away. It's an institution that I had been at maybe 3 weeks of my entire life, and I was only there just for a few minutes, maybe 10 years prior to that, to go to court. While sitting in the State Correctional Institution at Dallas, locked up in this hole, basically, the same way that I am now, only being allowed out of my, cell for exercise and to go to the shower, I was taken by the United States Marshals along with the prison guards out of there. Right after this riot or rebellion occurred at Camp Hill, without any type of warning, without any type of rationale, without anything, they came and got me, and they handcuffed me, and they suited me up, and they took me to the United States Penitentiary at Lewisburg, at which time they classified me to go to the United States Penitentiary at Marion, Illinois. Now, I asked them, why would I go to this Marion, Illinois? And I was told at that time by the classification board at Lewisburg, the federal penitentiary now, that I had been part of and a ringleader of the riots that just occurred at Camp Hill. And of course, I told them that I hadn't been at Camp Hill, and all they had to do was check the records and whatnot. And they said they had the records. And I was in these riots, and therefore, I was going to Marion. But in the meantime, I was going to the United States Penitentiary at Leavenworth, Kansas, in order to await a spot at Marion. So I was put on a plane. I was flew all around the country. Eventually, I got to Leavenworth. Once I got to Leavenworth, I was given this same rationale. I was locked up in Leavenworth. In the meantime, I was able to contact my relatives and some other people who was willing to look into the records. Once they looked into the record and they was able to retrieve the records themselves, they forwarded the records to the United States Penitentiary at Leavenworth, proving that I was not at Camp Hill. In fact, I was at Dallas. And it destroyed their rationale about forwarding me to Marion, so they was forced to release me into the general population. That told me that somebody within the prison system was doing what I had seen them do on other occasions, which was to monitor me wherever I'm at. And irregardless of whether I'm doing rule infractions or whatever I'm doing, if there's any way that they could manipulate me into another situation, worse or whatever the case is, they would do it. Because again, I was hundreds of miles away from this event.
So does Pennsylvania have an interstate compact agreement with the
They absolutely do.
And so you were in federal custody for a period of time?
I was in the federal custody for close to a year and a half.
And then they transferred you back to...
And then they transferred me back out of the federal custody, because the funny thing happened when I was in the federal custody. Once they found out, and I got the documents, that they weren't lying. I was told that the documents said that I did all this. Said that I was in the Camp Hill and all this sort of crap. So they were operating off of these documents. At least they had documents to say that it was operating off. However, their hand was forced behind this exposure that I was manipulated there under false pretenses. So they allowed me into the general population, which I stayed, which is the first time I had been in the general population since 1983.
You didn't have any trouble while you were in general?
I had absolutely no trouble at all. In fact, I was one of them so-called quote-unquote model prisoners, which meant that I went to school, I went to work, I minded my business.
So this is basically the only time you've been in general population was when they tried to get rid of you out of the state system and send you to the feds, and the feds found out that they were bamboozled by the state, and they put you in general population, and then the state took you back.
And then the state, after about a year and a half, I don't know, they called for me back and they put me on another plane.
They missed you.
And they returned me. So as soon as I was returned, I was immediately
put back in
the hole. In fact, I was put back in the same institution. However, while I was at the federal penitentiary, I suspected that this wouldn't be forever. Nothing is forever, of course, so I collected all these documents about how I was manipulated to the federal penitentiary, my work and my school and my other adjustment record at the federal penitentiary, and I was in the general population. And I collected all these things and I presented them when I returned to the institution that sent me. But of course, they knew why they had sent me, so they wasn't really concerned with what I said when I come back. So I was locked up there. The only thing I was told is what I mentioned earlier, that look, we're building an institution for guys like you, and once that's built, you will be allowed to be in the regular general population. That was 1991. So once I come up here in 1995, I come to find that was a sham also.
Sure. Brother, it seems like you've been through hell and back. You think that you don't think that there's a campaign that's possible to change, at the very minimum, change your prison status?
It is my firm conviction.
First of all, have you ever brought a lawsuit or any type of legal action about your status? Did that get muffled? That's okay. Did you ever bring any type of legal action in regards to this type of treatment?
I've been bringing legal actions for the last 20 years. In fact, within that time, I've become a pretty accomplished jailhouse lawyer. I constantly bring legal actions on my behalf and other people's behalf. But this never does anything. In my case, it helps other people, but it never helps me.
But have you ever had an outside attorneys systematically deal with your conditions of confinement?
Unfortunately, no. I've never had an opportunity to get enough resources to obtain an outside attorney on my own, nor have I been provided one by any other source.
So the Department of Corrections, Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, have never seriously been challenged around their policy in terms of their treatment, your treatment?
Up to now, no, they haven't been seriously challenged, but they know all the issues because I believe I've become accomplished enough.
No, they've all been all the issues.
I've presented them.
But that's all been pro se.
Yeah. It's all been on my own. I've never had any type of outside help to help me put pressure on them to...
What do you think about that?
I think there is a very good possibility that I could be released from within this lockup type of confinement 23 hours a day if everything was exposed within a court of law that could not just sweep it under the rug because I'm a prisoner and nobody's looking over their shoulder. Because there is not too much of a rationale for keeping me locked up in confinement like this with the very good, behavior record that I have.
Well, you know that now, courts are very reluctant to interfere with prison officials running of the prison system. And they tend to defer to prison officials when it comes to matters of security and concerns like that. So what you're saying is that if you had a fair hearing, you think that even in that climate, even given those restrictive parameters, that you would probably at least at the very minimum, gain normal access to the to prison population?
I could gain the normal access to the prison population, I'm sure, with a fair hearing, with enough outside overview for the simple reason as we...
With enough outside what?
With enough outside overview for the simple reason, as we spoke earlier, is that this prison specifically was made as a maxi prison for that type of thing. And in fact, you have a number of people here, which it wouldn't be necessary and it wouldn't even be incorrect for me to call names as to people who is within this institution who have escaped, as I have, who have had weapons within inside the penitentiary, as I have. In fact, they have people in here who've killed a number of people, which I have not. So you have people here who are walking around within the general population. In fact, you have a number of them. So I'm being kept here for two basic reasons, I truly believe. And those are, one of them is personal vindictiveness on the part of some of the staff that I've had prior contact with. Number two is because I'm deemed by this same system, the overall system, not just State Correctional Institution at Green, but the whole Pennsylvania Department of Correction. I'm deemed as someone who will always attempt to do something positive on the part of the prisoners, because, as I stated, I've become a pretty accomplished jailhouse lawyer, not because I thought that this would ever have me released from the prison system, because I don't really think it will, but I've become an accomplished jailhouse lawyer because I seen that in order for me to stop the worst abuses that were occurring with myself and the other men who I was in sympathy with in the institution, I had to be able to put the long arm of the law on the people who were breaking the law. So I learned the law just specifically for that reason. So I'm a threat because not only am I within certain people's minds a potential escape risk, but I am also a threat because I've come across as one who would not tolerate under no circumstances someone going against things that I know they're not supposed to go against. We're all supposed to go by the same rules. So there's sort of a leveling here. Although I'm a prisoner here, I got rules and you got rules too. So you follow the rules and I'll follow the rules. And then outside of that, we'll pursue whatever else we're pursuing. I'll pursue to try to, be released from prison or to get out of prison, and you pursue trying to keep me here and to do your job. But don't overstep them bounds, because if you do, I'm going to put the whole weight of the law on you. So that's a threat to them because they like to overstep the bounds in the cases where they know, and in the cases where they don't know, then they overstep the bounds to ignorance.
Mm-hmm. So it's obvious that that unless there's some type of public scrutiny around the treatment that you are going through and other political prisoners are going through, not much is going to be done about it.
Nothing that I know of. As what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
And you're getting a little more than what is the reality, because I said I'm usually not even in these type of clothing. This is the first time I've seen a shirt and a pair of pants since I've been
I was
here.
getting ready to say, how did you press these? That shirt looks pretty sharp.
Not only this, I don't even wear shirts and pants. I wear a canvas jumpsuit with blue lines and a white background, and it looked like something out of one of those concentration camps in Nazi Germany. It's the first time I've seen anything like this. I'm assuming this is for the cameras and whatnot. I can't assume it's for anything else, because I've never given access to none of this.
I think you're right about that. In trying to do the work around political prisoners, one of the problems that we encounter again and again is the incredulous attitude that people have when we tell them about cases like yours, where brothers that have been in prison over 25 years in the United States. Most people don't have a understanding of this history, and they don't have an understanding that the political prisoners exist. I think that that's beginning to change somewhat. In your view, what is it that you think people should be doing and need to be doing around cases like yours and cases like Mumia's and cases like the New York 3? What is it you think that people out here should be trying to do?
Well, my concern specifically in that arena is this. I'm not really concerned about myself or people like me, for the simple reason that we collectively within this prison system and our overall communities within the country and the country in general has much more pressing problems when it comes to prison than problems like mine. Of course, I'm being brutalized and whatnot, sensory and perceptual deprivation, just by being kept within a box about the size of this room here for years on end. However, we have much more pressing situations than mine. We have the case of Mumia Abu Jamal. If our communities if the people who are aware of this, the people who are not aware of this, if something is really not done in his case, I suspect that the state will kill him in the not too distant future. Mumia Abu-Jamal has successfully exposed so many inconsistencies about the criminal justice system and about the overall situation that people find themselves in contact with the criminal justice system, which is the blacks, other ethnics, and the poorer people, that he has become an extreme threat to the overall system. So a person like Mumia, he's in we're like in a giant bullseye, and he's in the center. And I'm about 8 rungs way out there someplace. So everybody's trying to get a bullseye. So they're trying to get people like him. Even outside of him, you have other people who I'm more concerned about personally before you get to people like me. And that's other people all around the country who are on death row. And these are men who I have to extrapolate from my own knowledge and my own experiences within this system, where I've been locked up on death rows for years at a time with other men because of my security status, although I never had the death penalty. I've been locked up on death row with men that I know for a fact had no business being on death row, if nothing else, that some of these men were totally mentally incompetent, although I'm not any type of doctor, or don't hold myself out to be one, but I'm not no fool either. And I can see that these men had no reason, or I can see that no other men would have a reason to destroy these men, because these men were not responsible for themselves, at least at that time. Not at the time of the crime, but at a possible time that they might possibly be destroyed by, capital punishment. These men are still within these institutions, within this Pennsylvania state system. I've been on death row with scores of men who are still on death row now throughout the state, many of them within this institution, that I knew for a fact. Some of them were mentally incompetent, according to the law. Some other ones, it seemed highly likely to me that it's a good possibility that they did not receive fair trials. And then when you go outside of the system, you have a system similar, you have situations similar to that throughout the country. In particular, and this brings us a little closer to the bullseye, right now, within the state of Indiana, you have men who are in a life and death struggle, a number of them, with the prison system of the state of Indiana. They are literally in a struggle with the prison system where prisoners are being executed, guards are being killed. The guards say that the prisoners are killing guards in retaliation, and the prisoners are not owning up to any of these killings, but the guards are winding up dead, and the prisoners are being executed. Now these people, they don't have wide coverage within the news and whatnot, and they don't have
when you say the prisoners are being executed, what do you mean they're being executed? They're being executed under the guise of law, like executed in the gas chamber, or you mean they're being killed illegally and surreptitiously within the inmate population by police, by guards?
They're being killed under the guise of law. But nevertheless, these men have situations and have street cases that makes it highly suspect whether or not that they receive fair trial. In 1994, December 1994, a brother named Gregory Resnover, he was executed by the state of Indiana in relationship to the killing of a police officer. I believe last month another man was scheduled to be executed in the state of Indiana in relationship to the same alleged killing of this police officer. I've read what that I could get through the channels of the law library about this case, and what limited amount that I've been able to understand, glean about the law up to now. I'm positive that these men did not receive just a generalized fair trial. They received a prejudicial trial. One of them has already been executed. Another was scheduled. In fact, he might have been executed, because the last I read about him through the legal documents a couple months ago, he was scheduled to be executed last month. A third man was locked up and given a charge of allegedly killing an officer, allegedly in retaliation for the killing of the first man. The whole system is in an uproar within the state of Indiana right now. Those type of things to me put those type of situations much more closer to what needs to be done to address things than people that's in my situation, for the simple reason that if the various state and other systems can get away with doing these type of things, then they build up a sort of momentum that allows them to train, refine, and make adjustments where that they can do more things of this nature to people that in fact don't belong in the position, period. Although I'm against any type of capital punishment, irregardless of how heinous the crime is, for the simple reason I think that the system is way too much on the side of the criminal justice system for them to be put to death, any type of prisoner, period, within the United States. Be that as it may, I believe that these are more or less test cases since the reintroduction of capital punishment to make it a dire threat to people like me, who is an admitted one who will, under no circumstances, who will back down or will ever allow this system or any other system to oppress me or to oppress anybody else that I could possibly help, which leaves me potentially open to being manipulated or otherwise wind up in a situation where my life could be taken. So I see that as a threat to me. So I think that they are the type of people, them and the people who's on death row in general within the country, those are the type of people that I'm more concerned with before you get to a case like me, because I got a lot more breathing room than they do. I got a lot more time to think, to plan, and to attempt to use my own type of devices and rely on the source of universal power to bring something forth that I'm not aware of to change the balance of things before things get to me. I'm not really concerned with myself as much as I'm concerned about these situations.
Well, you know, that seems to be one of the major qualities of political prisoners like yourself, a consistent and principled concern for trying to advance the cause of people other than yourselves. And I think that's one of the sad parts that we have to deal with in the streets, the lack of support for brothers and sisters like yourself who are in prison, who have made those sacrifices. One of the things that, as activists on the outside, that we find difficult to deal with is trying to translate the support around the anti-death penalty support around cases like Mumia into a broader principled support for political prisoners in general, to build some type of institutional structures that will bring your case and the case of other political prisoners to the public scrutiny, at least at the very minimum, as you well know now, to try to bring black elected officials to the position where they will begin to question exactly what the counterintelligence program has done in our community, re-examine cases like yourself to see if you were accorded an objective and fair hearing, to see if you are still being subjected to abuse by officials of the state because of your background and because of your consistency and opposition to the state. I think that that's the greatest challenge now, is trying to build some type of broader movement to deal with the concerns of all political prisoners. I think some of the things that's coming now out of the reports, like Amnesty International's report on the New York City Police Department, on the San Francisco Police Department, on the Chicago Police Department, I think that these reports have shown people around the world that these institutions that they look to as the paragon of law enforcement integrity are in fact racist, are in fact run by men who are very venal, are unprofessional, and who will break the law in carrying out their ends. And I think that while it's noble that someone like yourself would see the case of Mumia and the other political prisoners on death row as important, I think that one of the reasons that we wanted to get exposure for your case and other cases is precisely because people really have to hear stories like yours and really have to understand that this stuff is going on right now as we speak. The type of treatment that's accorded, that you're accorded here in this prison, and indeed over the entire period of your incarceration, is something that people should be absolutely horrified by. And I think that the fact that it's not is a sad commentary on those of us who claim to be human rights activists, who claim to be concerned about the abuse of power in the society.
Let me say this in relationship to that. What I think that people should be horrified about, and I agree with you, they don't know. I know for a fact that they don't know, because it's my firm conviction that if they did know, irregardless of what their stance is on crime in general, on particular crimes, in particular the death penalty, any given variable that you want to pull out of the overall crime or the security matrix as it applied to citizens, I'm positive that if they were aware of the fact that people were being kept in situations, like I'm being kept, because I'm not the only one being kept in this situation. As I said, there's 386 units just within this particular institution where everybody is equally treated the same way that I am, and as far as the sensory perceptual deprivation. And if they were aware that you have situations like this all across the country, you have more situations like this just within the Pennsylvania state system. They're not as large as this, but you have control units throughout the state system. And if the general public was aware of the effects that this had on the individual that stayed in here, and was also aware of the fact that the overwhelming majority, if not 95 or more % of these prisoners will eventually be released and will be returning to their communities. And if they was aware of the fact that this type of situation clinically, from the various type of studies that were done, which are voluminous, have shown that this type of situation generally causes a man or woman to do one of two things. It causes you to retract, or it causes you to coil up like a spring. If you retract, you become like a vegetable. You're no more use to yourself, and you're no more use to anybody else, which amongst this 90-some %, those parties become a burden when they return to society. But those who recoil, they become more of a burden for the simple reason that they're like a spring that's tightly coiled, and they will be returning to the street. So when they return to the street, not only will they not be returning to prison, but they become an extreme danger to the overall society. And the reason they become a danger is because of the policies of these institutions that, I might add, they have absolutely no legal or moral mandate or justification to pursue policies like this, in particular because these policies have been tried over and over again in the past, going back hundreds of years. And every time they attempt to pursue a policy that of this extreme deprivation that caused men to recoil or to turn into vegetables, it overflows on the overall society, because these men return to the society and they're not productive individuals, and in the extreme situation, they're extremely lethal and dangerous individuals. So usually it's not looked at holistically by those who are not really familiar with it, and they see one thing in particular. They see that these who become a danger are dangers to the society, but they don't make the connection because of their ignorance of the overall matrix. They don't make the connection of those who were, through malfeasance, misfeasance of their mandate, help make them into this extreme threat. And as a general rule, they don't be a threat to these people who made them a threat, because these people who made them that, they are intimately familiar with this because they live with these men while they're making that, and they wouldn't be no place around them once they left the institution. So when they leave the institution and they become bigger problems on the system, where they become extremely dangerous, then what it does in effect is it has a snowball effect, and it ensures these people that they have a job, and so that they can keep recreating the same thing. So in effect between them, other unprincipled politicians, they play on this, and they just say community be damned.
So you're saying there's a cycle of violence and a cycle of antisocial behavior that's perpetrated within these prison systems by the prison's treatment of people who come into their charges, and then they're eventually released into the community.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that it's criminal. It's so well documented, and it's been spoken against so many times that it's truly criminal. And not only has it been documented on the national level, but it's been documented on the international level through the various agencies, reports and whatnot within the United Nations and the related non-government organizations. They have documented it's crystal clear what this type of treatment does in any country.
Well, yes, there have been forms on sensory deprivation, and I'm glad you brought this up, because I think that there have been extensive studies, especially in Germany, on the German political prisoners who had undergone long-term sensory deprivation and long-term isolation, and there have been studies that have been done on this phenomena. And you're absolutely right. I think that one of the things that perhaps will have to be done, and that this entire phenomena is going to have to be revisited again in terms of the United States penal system and how it's dealing with political prisoners, especially now that there are this new anti-terrorist legislation on the bill, and political incarceration seems more likely. Overt political incarceration seems more likely in the United States. But we only have a little bit of more time left, and so I wanted to ask you in closing, you have not been able to really have your voice projected out into the community now. And a lot of times people think that because a person's in prison that they don't have a valid viewpoint or an analysis of what's happening on the outside. And even given your limited access to reading material and media, what types of observations would you really want people to reflect on? I mean, what would you think? What are some of the things you would like to say to people right now at this particular point in history?
Well, the thing that comes across to me, because I have plenty of time to think and reflect, my access to various reading and research materials is restricted. But from the materials that I could get, and the amount of time that I've been able to reflect, and the amount of years that I've been in the penitentiary, gave me a whole bunch of time to put together a whole bunch of bits and pieces. And of course, I bounce these off of people like yourself in a situation like this, family members, people that I write or whatnot, because if anything, I can get more out of writing and receiving that.
How important is family to you?
Family to me is the beginning and end of everything. I mean, after all, we all come from family. Family is it. My family, which I have 7 children myself, I'm from a large family. I'm from a family of 12 siblings and a mother and father. I had what I would consider, in terms of my particular racial group, I had a middle class upbringing. So I always had a father and mother in the home. I was taken to church. I had a relatively stable home life. So I came up in a family setting. I have nothing but good memories about family, and I was married twice, and from that it was 7 children, and all of them are grown at the present, and I have been alienated from them from
When was the
different.
last time you touched any of your family? When was the last time you touched any of your family members?
1990.
Was that in court or something?
No, that was in the United States Penitentiary at Leavenworth when I was full.
When you had full privileges.
Yes.
1990.
1990.
And before then?
1983. In other words, I keep doing these 5-6 year stretches in the hole until something extraordinary happens, and I'm generally forced out of the hole, or in some instances maybe I can force myself out. But at any rate, I haven't had much physical contact with my family, or my my own offspring, but I've had plenty of contact with them through writing in particular. And as a consequence, through them and others, I'm able to attempt to keep my finger on the pulse of the overall society. I think family is extremely important. To me, it's more important than anything else. However, as in answer to your question about in general, it's my feeling that we, all of us here, and everybody within these United States in particular, we are in what I consider a pre-crisis period within the whole country. Of course, it don't look that way because, there's no Soviet Union, so-called Cold War. The country itself is not in a war where the young men are going off. The young men and young women are not going off any place risking their life. The economy is kind of bad or whatnot, but I truly believe, from my own observations, from my study, from my research and whatnot, that the United States is in a pre-crisis period. And I believe the crisis is being brought about through a complete realignment of the economic forces within the entire world. And because of this realignment with the economic forces brought about mainly from the subduing, for all practical purposes, of the Soviet Union and their various type of satellite states or their clients all over the world, this alignment has allowed and giving full access to United States capital and other competing capital, whether it's in Japan, within Western Europe or whatnot, complete access to what they really want, which is labor, cheap labor, and markets for their goods or whatnot. Now, I don't want this to come across like this is some type of purely or involved, economic critique, because it's not. I'm just saying that's one of the levers that's pushing us toward this alignment. In the meantime, you've had in this country, for different ethnics, for hundreds of years, a pre-crisis situation. We know that with the Native Americans, they've been in crisis since Columbus and the clown stepped off the boat. With the African Americans, we've been in crisis from the moment that they put some stuff like this on us and dragged us over here. The Mexicans down on the border, Mexican Americans, they call them down, the Mexicanos, Chicanos, or whatnot, the states of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, and California, they've been in crisis ever since they come in contact with these same European forces. However, each one of these different racial and ethnic groups was in crisis that was somewhat isolated, or was kept isolated from a generalized crisis within the overall society, and as a consequence, they was able to be contained. I see something that's happening on the horizon now, in my own particular opinion, that has not happened in this country, at least since the Civil War, different type of crisis. And that's that this country, through its economic throes, and its inner economic throes, which I think basically is capital within this country, is exporting itself throughout the world, seeking the cheapest ways to do things. But I think that their strategy for real is not to leave this country. I think their strategy is a broad attack against the overall masses in this country. The white masses, which is the majority, I think that they are the primary target that's being targeted by this capital, and this capital want to leave the country until that they can strangle them down to the point that when they return to this country, and I believe they're coming back because there's a massive infrastructure here, educational and otherwise, that they want to use with these workers. And I believe they're going to strangle them down, and when they return, they're going to put them into semi-slavery type of situations, which they call minimum wage. In the meantime, the Africans in America, the Native Americans, the other ethnics who are on the bottom, we're going to be crushed even more so. But as long as we were separated...
Yeah, the institutionalization of the poor, yeah. The institutionalization of the poor and the institutionalization of poverty, according to caste and class and gender, is becoming very much a reality in America. Welfare is being eliminated. Minimum wage was a struggle that people had to fight tooth and nail for. People now are put to work doing menial tasks just to stay on welfare. Welfare is inadequate to meet people's needs. Food stamps are being cut back. Aid to dependent children is being cut back. So there's a whole strata of people who are being institutionalized into poverty. And in fact, those middle class jobs that people had acquired to run this bureaucracy, as a consequence of the bureaucracy needed to administer to the poor, are themselves going to be thrown out of work as a consequence of this. So I think that what you're talking about, the globalization of sweatshops, so to speak, the creation of a prison industry, a captive population to produce cheap labor, is something that we're seeing in terms of privatization efforts around prison systems, in the return to quasi-slave prison labor. I think you're absolutely right. But
in that relationship, let me just say one more thing. I don't think that it will be just smoothly to suppressing the wages. Because in fact, I don't think that the overwhelming majority of the American people will even stand for it. And as a price, and as a consequence, the real crisis I see is that there's a potential in this country for a whole lot of turmoil. And when the turmoil comes, I doubt very seriously whether it will be directed at the very people that's responsible.
I think we see that happening now with the right wing and their disenchantment.
That's the crisis that I was speaking of.
Don't interrupt us. Don't worry about it. Just keep going.
Okay. So, you know, there were a few other questions too that we never really got into.
You have about 7 minutes left.
How much? How much is it? What type of support do you recommend that? Is it okay? What type of support work do you think people should start to do now in order to build consciousness around the use of the law for political repression, and the fact that there are political prisoners in jail, and the fact that the death penalty is increasingly being used as a mechanism for social control of national minorities? What type of work do you think people really should start to do now?
I firmly believe that within the African American community, within other ethnic communities, and the overall society in general, that there is more potential to ameliorate some of the effects of these things, if not turn them completely around, within the religious community than any place else.
Well, the religious community you're talking about in the Christian community, in the Muslim community,
and the various religious communities, I should say. The reasons why I think that it's more potential there is because outside of the institutional strength of the religious community within the Africans in America's community, the religious community has a moral base that can come to grips with what's going on better than anything else that I think that's available within the overall society. The reason that I believe that the religious community can be stimulated to work on this moral base is based around the same reasons that these other individuals from the other side of the spectrum, from the right, is trying to push off a lot of the responsibility that they would otherwise have to assume and not pocket the proceeds from the taxes or whatnot. They recognize that also that this religious community can be morally recruited to see that they have to take up the slack of some of these individuals in the society that need their help. I think the same religious community can be shown morally, and I think for moral reasons, that they have it within themselves. I think that they would be more responsive than any other part of the society to go to with these particular type of concerns. If the religious community within the Africans in America's overall societies, if they knew about what was going on in these penitentiaries, they would, number one, they would have a decided difference about how their tax dollars should be used and to attack the crime problem, which is a real problem. But they would also know that the crime problem couldn't be attacked by putting it in here and letting it speed up and become supercharged in here and then return to the street and to perpetuate itself, because it was fine-tuned within these penitentiaries. They could rise to the occasion. They are the people who the case can be made to, whether it's the Christian community, the Muslim community, any other group that has a moral foundation, because they are only would be attending these particular institutions is because something inside of them telling them that they should attempt to do right and forbid wrong. And as a consequence, these are the people that you're supposed to go to, and you say part of your responsibility is stopping others and encouraging others to do wrong. Not encourage them to do wrong, but prevent them from doing wrong and to encourage them to do right. The right wing in this country is thoroughly familiar with that. But the right wing, as we know, is manipulating it against people they have no business manipulating it against. But they don't have, by any shadow of a calculation in my mind, they don't have the ear of the overwhelming majority of the religious people in this country. And the overwhelming majority of the religious people in this country, I believe, is the balance that will determine whether or not that prisoners who are wrongly being treated, from normal prisoners, social prisoners, to political prisoners, I think the religious community, they have the balance to determine whether or not this treatment will be changed.
Well, I just want to say, Russell, that I hope that we could edit some stuff from this tape and use it to try to at least bring some attention to the long-term torture that you've been undergoing. I just want to say, brother, that your strength is phenomenal. It revitalizes me, and I have a lot of work to do. Most of my work is going to be in Europe over the next 6 months, from Africa to Europe, around these issues. And I think that bringing attention to your case, and especially to your ongoing torture and trying to bring the state of Pennsylvania to be accountable for that, is going to be a very interesting struggle. And I say very interesting struggle because it's clear that it's not sufficient just to imprison you, that there's another agenda here.
Absolutely.
And that the agenda is not just to imprison someone because they broke the law. The agenda is to break someone because of what they believe and stand for. And that the breaking of this person is very, very important to the integrity of the state. And I think that, as you pointed out, the American public, and indeed the public at large, should understand that when the state has an investment in breaking another human being's spirit because of what they stand for and what they believe, then we need to look at the type of state that we are permitting to operate in our name. And I just want to say, brother, you stay strong, and I am deeply honored to be able to do this interview, and I hope that in the future we can do something much more extensive and hopefully from behind this glass. And so I think that that's one of the next struggles that we have to wage, is getting you from behind this glass, at least in the short term. That's not your freedom, and I understand that. But I think that the process in doing that will enable people to look at cases like yours and begin to see what they're really about. So again, brother, it was good to see you.
I'm glad I was given this opportunity to, in particular, talk to you.
Well, that's your daughter that did that.
You know, but I'm very glad to get that opportunity. Because,
well, you have some children. You have some children that are warriors, that have an indomitable spirit, just like their daddy, and that's something they can't take away from you, and that's something they can't take away from our community. So I'm just saying.
And that's, I believe, the failure in this whole thing.
Oh, yeah. They didn't plan that one.
It can't be taken.
They didn't plan that
one.
one.
The only way it can be taken is when I'm 6 feet under. Other than that, I'm going.
Well, when that happens, and when we're all 6 feet under, then we become ancestors.
Absolutely.
And our spiritual power then goes to those young folks to continue.
But I'm glad to be given this opportunity, and I would like for you to, in particular, tell Sister Tanaquil that I was asking about her.
Oh, she knows.
And I hear so much about her that I can't wait for the day.
She's the pariah. She's the pariah out there. But you must drop us a line, and let us know what's happening. Okay, bro?
I'll do that.
And stay in touch with me in Africa. You got the address and everything.
I do.
Okay.
But tell the sister I can't wait for the day that I sit down and talk to her.
Well, she's going to come see you.
That's good.
Next month.
Because I done heard so much about her that I know being in her presence would be like talking to Harriet Tubman somebody.
Sure.
So I love you, kind of sisters, and keep on doing what you're doing, brother.
Okay, bro.
Yes, sir.
Stay strong.
Okay.